Sometimes life's most precious gifts come wrapped in unexpected packages. In a small country church, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, Mark Anderson was just stopping by to pick up donated school supplies for his kids. He never expected to find Sarah Matthews there, still in her wedding dress, tears streaming down her face. Her perfect day had crumbled when the groom never showed, leaving her alone with her shattered dreams. Mark understood broken dreams all too well. Raising two young children alone while working two jobs wasn't the life he'd planned either. But sometimes the best families aren't born. They're built through acts of kindness and courage. Could this chance encounter between a heartbroken bride and a struggling single dad lead to the healing they both desperately need? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mark Anderson's fingers traced the worn edges of his children's homework calendar, its margins crowded with hastily scribbled reminders. Emma, science project due Thursday. Jacob, soccer practice 4 p.m. Night shift starts 11 p.m. The calendar hung in their modest kitchen like a testament to their carefully orchestrated chaos, each entry a piece of the puzzle that was their daily life. The old grandfather clock in the hallway, his father's parting gift, chimed 6 times, signaling the start of another carefully choreographed morning. "Emma, Jacob, time to get moving!" His voice carried up the narrow staircase of their 2-story craftsman home, a house that had seen better days but still sheltered them with stubborn dignity. 10-year-old Emma appeared first, her dark hair already neatly braided. She'd learned to do it herself last year, one of many small adaptations to life without a mother. Her blue backpack was properly packed, homework completed. She was growing up too fast, shouldering responsibilities no child should have to bear. "Dad, can you sign my permission slip? It's for the museum field trip next week." Emma held out the wrinkled paper, her expression serious. "I already filled out everything else." 7-year-old Jacob thundered down the stairs moments later, one shoe on, the other dangling from his hand. His Batman t-shirt was inside out, and his sandy blonde hair stuck up at impossible angles. "Dad, I can't find my other sock." Mark signed Emma's form while reaching out to help Jacob with his shirt. "Check the dryer, buddy. I did laundry last night between shifts." He glanced at his watch. 30 minutes until he needed to drop them. At school, then straight to the garage where he worked as a mechanic. The kitchen counter told its own story: half-empty cereal boxes, a loaf of bread nearing its end, and 3 bananas starting to brown. Mark had meant to go grocery shopping yesterday, but after pulling a double shift at the garage and covering for a sick colleague at his night security job, he'd barely managed to stay awake for the laundry. "Emma, can you help your brother find his sock? I'll make your lunches." Mark moved efficiently through their morning routine, assembling sandwiches and adding the last apple to Emma's lunch bag. Jacob would get the slightly bruised banana. He wouldn't mind. As he worked, his eyes drifted to the family photo hanging on the fridge, taken 3 years ago at the county fair. It was the last picture they had with Claire before she decided that family life was too constraining for her artistic aspirations. Her goodbye note had been brief. "I need to find myself. Don't try to contact me." The divorce papers arrived 3 months later. Emma's voice pulled him back to the present. "Found his sock, Dad?" It was under his bed with his library book from last week. She helped Jacob put on his shoes, her small hands working the laces with practiced ease. "Thanks, sweetie." The endearment caught in his throat. Emma shouldn't have to be so responsible, so young, but she'd stepped up after Claire. Left helping with Jacob, keeping her grades up, never complaining. She was so much stronger than her years. Jacob finally properly dressed, munched on his toast while working on math problems he'd forgotten about the night before. "Dad, what's 7 times 8? 56. But you're supposed to be learning these, not just asking." Mark poured the last of the coffee into his travel mug. "We'll practice your times tables tonight after dinner, okay?" The morning continued its familiar dance, checking backpacks, finding lost homework sheets, making sure teeth were brushed. Mark moved through, It all with the precision of long practice, but his exhaustion showed in the shadows under his eyes. At the garage, his boss had been understanding about his need for flexible hours, but the night security job was less forgiving. Last week, he'd nearly fallen asleep during his rounds, earning a warning from the supervisor. He couldn't afford to lose either job, not with the mortgage, the kids' needs, and the steady stream of unexpected expenses that came with raising two growing children. As they piled into his aging Ford pickup, Emma asked, "Can we have spaghetti tonight, Dad? I can help make it." "Sure, honey." He smiled at her in the rearview mirror. "But remember, Mrs. Peterson is watching you after school today. I won't be home until after your bedtime." "Because of your night job?" Jacob's voice was small, disappointed. "Just for tonight, buddy. Tomorrow's Saturday, and I promise we'll do something special." Mark didn't mention that special would have to be something free. The property tax bill was coming due, and Emma needed new shoes for school. He dropped them off at Riverdale Elementary, watching as they joined the stream of children flowing through the front doors. Emma held Jacob's hand, guiding him through the crowd. She turned back to wave, and Mark waved back, his heart both heavy and proud. Pulling away from the curb, he glanced at the homework calendar he'd stuffed in his jacket pocket. Between the garage, the night job, and single parenthood, his life had become an endless juggling act. But his children were healthy, doing well in school, and still managed to smile despite everything they'd lost. He'd make it work. He had to. They were counting on him. The church and its unexpected bride were the furthest things from his mind. As he headed to the garage, ready to start another long day of keeping all the pieces of their life from falling apart. Sarah Matthews sat in the church's small side office, staring at the pile of unopened wedding gifts on the desk before her. Each perfectly wrapped package seemed to mock her with its cheerful paper and carefully tied bows. Pastor Mike had insisted she could return them tomorrow, but the thought of facing anyone right now made her stomach clench. The ivory lace of her wedding dress, carefully selected 6 months ago with her mother's approval, now felt like a costume from someone else's life. She'd spent the last hour hiding in here, listening to the murmurs of departing guests and the gradually descending silence as the church emptied. Her phone had finally stopped its incessant buzzing. She couldn't bear to read any more pitying messages. "I'm so sorry, Sarah." That's what James's text had said, 3 hours after he was supposed to be standing beside her at the altar. "I can't do this. Madison and it just happened. Please forgive me." Madison, her best friend since college, the maid of honor who'd helped her choose flowers, taste cakes, and plan every detail of this day. The woman who'd held her hand through first-date jitters with James 2 years ago, who'd squealed with delight at the engagement announcement. The betrayal cut deeper than the abandonment. From the office window, Sarah watched the last cars pull away from the church parking lot. Her own family had left reluctantly, her mother insisting she come home with them. But home meant her childhood bedroom, still decorated with her teaching credentials and photos of happier times, photos that included Madison. She'd chosen teaching, kindergarten, because she loved helping children discover their potential. Every September brought a new class of bright eyes and eager minds, ready to learn their letters and numbers, to make friends and create art. In her classroom, every child was special, every small victory celebrated. James had claimed to love that about her, her patience with children, her natural nurturing instinct. "You'll be such a wonderful mother," he'd said on their third date, watching her interact with her nephew at a family barbecue. Now she wondered if any of his words had been true. A fresh wave of tears threatened, but Sarah blinked them back. She'd cried enough in the past few hours to fill an ocean. Her carefully applied makeup was long gone, her elaborately styled hair falling in loose strands around her face. The worst part wasn't the humiliation or even the heartbreak, it was the uncertainty. At 32, she'd thought she had it all figured out. Marriage to James, starting a family, continuing to teach while raising their children. They'd even put an offer on a house, a charming colonial with a fenced backyard, perfect for future kids. Now that future had evaporated like morning mist, leaving her with nothing but a closet full of wedding presents she couldn't bear to open, and a family who'd already started their "I told you so" chorus about James's wandering eyes. Her mother's words from an hour ago echoed in her mind. "Come home, Sarah. You can take some time off, sort things out, maybe transfer to a different school district where you won't have to see them." As if running away would heal the wound of this betrayal. The teaching job was the one thing she refused to give up. Her students needed her, and frankly, she needed them too. Their innocent enthusiasm and unconditional affection were sometimes the brightest parts of her day. Monday morning, she'd have 25 little faces looking up at her during circle. Time, eager to share their weekend stories. The thought provided a small measure of comfort. Sarah stood, her dress rustling softly in the quiet room. She should call a cab, find a hotel for the night. The thought of staying with family or any of her friends, who'd all known Madison too, was unbearable. She needed space to breathe, to think, to figure out her next step without well-meaning advice or pitying looks. The sound of the office door opening startled her. She turned, expecting to see Pastor Mike returning to lock up, but instead found a stranger, a man in worn jeans and a faded work shirt, looking equally surprised to find anyone still here. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, starting to back away. "I was just here to pick up some school supplies." His voice trailed off as he took in her tear-stained face and wedding dress. Sarah tried to summon a polite smile, but her lips trembled with the effort. "The church is closed," she managed to say, her voice hoarse from crying. "Pastor Mike left a while ago." The man hesitated in the doorway, concern evident in his tired eyes. He looked about her age, maybe a few years older, with the weathered face of someone who worked outdoors. Do you need help?" The simple question, asked without pity or judgment, somehow breached the last of her defenses. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks as the whole humiliating story tumbled out. The missing groom, the best friend's betrayal, her inability to face her. Family's reaction. He listened quietly, his presence somehow steadying. When she finished, he introduced himself as Mark Anderson and offered her something she hadn't expected, a safe place to stay while she figured things out. "I have a spare room," he said. "It's nothing fancy, but it's quiet, and you won't have to deal with any well-meaning relatives tonight." Sarah looked at the pile of wedding gifts, at her ruined dress, at the shattered pieces of her carefully planned life. Common sense said not to trust a stranger, but something in Mark's steady gaze and gentle manner told her she could trust him. "Thank you," she whispered, surprised to find she meant it. "I think I'd like that." Mark pulled into his driveway just as Mrs. Peterson was herding Emma and Jacob toward their front porch. The elderly neighbor paused, curious about the unfamiliar woman in the passenger seat, especially one wearing a wedding dress. "Dad's home. Early." Jacob's shout carried across the yard as he broke free from Mrs. Peterson's gentle grip and raced toward the truck. Emma followed more slowly, her observant eyes taking in Sarah's tear-stained face and formal attire. She clutched something in her hands, a piece of paper covered in careful crayon work. "Mrs. Peterson, thank you for watching them." Mark stepped out of the truck, trying to project a calmness he didn't entirely feel. "Something came up at the church, and I needed to help someone." The older woman's eyes sparkled with barely contained curiosity, but she simply nodded. The children were wonderful, as always. Emma helped Jacob with his reading, and they both finished their homework. She paused, then added softly, "If you need anything, dear, I'm just next door." As Mrs. Peterson made her way home, Mark helped Sarah out of the truck. Her wedding dress rustled against the vehicle's worn upholstery, incongruous against the backdrop of his modest home, with its slightly overgrown lawn and weathered paint. "These are my children," Mark said, as Jacob bounced on his toes, and Emma stood quietly assessing the situation. "Emma's 10 and Jacob's 7. Kids, this is Missy Sarah. She's going to stay with us for a little while." In her wedding dress? Jacob asked, eyes wide with wonder. Sarah managed a small laugh, the first Mark had heard from her. No, sweetie, I have some regular clothes in my car. It's still at the church, though. Dad can get it, Jacob proclaimed. With absolute faith in his father's ability to solve any problem. He fixes cars at work, so he can drive anything. Speaking of which, Mark checked his watch. I need to call work. Let them know I can't make my night shift. At Sarah's concerned look, he added, Don't worry about it. They'll understand. Emma stepped forward then, holding out her artwork. I made this when I heard Dad coming home. It's to say welcome. The paper revealed a carefully drawn house with 4 stick figures in front of it, one notably wearing what appeared to be a triangle-shaped dress. Sarah knelt, heedless of her wedding gown touching the concrete driveway, to accept the drawing. This is beautiful, Emma. Thank you. Her voice wavered slightly, and Mark noticed her blinking back fresh tears. Happy ones this time, he hoped. Inside, the house reflected their interrupted routine. Breakfast dishes still in the sink. Jacob's missing sock finally discovered on the living room floor. Emma's textbooks spread across the coffee table. Mark felt a flush of embarrassment, but Sarah didn't seem to notice the disorder. The bathroom's upstairs, first door on the right, Mark said. I'll run to the church and get your car, then maybe we can figure out dinner. While Mark was gone, Sarah changed into jeans and a sweater she'd packed for her honeymoon. She emerged from the bathroom to find Emma sitting on the top stair, waiting. Do you know how to braid hair? Emma asked, fingers twisting in her own dark strands. I can do it myself, but sometimes it's crooked in the back. I do, Sarah replied, recognizing the question for what it was. An olive branch, an offering of connection. Would you like me to show you some tricks? By the time Mark returned with Sarah's car, he found them in the kitchen. Emma sat on a chair while Sarah gently wove her hair into an intricate French braid, explaining each step. Jacob was perched on the counter, something Mark usually discouraged, earnestly telling Sarah about his soccer team. And then I kicked the ball really hard, Jacob was saying, hands gesturing wildly. But it went over the goal instead of in it. Dad says that's called overshooting. Sometimes the best players overshoot, Sarah assured him, securing Emma's braid with an elastic. It means you have a strong kick. You just need to practice aiming. Mark cleared his throat, and 3 heads turned toward him. The scene before him, so domestic, so natural, made his heart twist with an emotion he wasn't ready to name. I got your car, he said, placing her keys on the counter, and I thought maybe we could make spaghetti. Emma requested it this morning. Can Miss Sarah help? Emma asked, admiring her new braid in the reflection of the microwave door. She said she likes to cook. They worked together in the kitchen, moving around each other with surprising ease. Sarah showed Jacob how to test the pasta by throwing a strand at the wall. If it sticks, it's ready, while Emma helped her father with the sauce. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by Jacob's questions about everything from Sarah's favorite color to whether she knew any dinosaur facts. Over dinner, Mark noticed how Sarah listened intently to each child, asking follow-up questions that demonstrated genuine interest. She drew out shy Emma's thoughts about her current book and sympathized with Jacob's frustration over multiplication tables. I have some tricks for remembering times tables, she told Jacob. Maybe tomorrow I could show you. Tomorrow? Jacob's face lit up, and Mark realized his son was already assuming Sarah would be a continuing presence in their lives. Later, after the children were in bed, Mark and Sarah sat at the kitchen table with mugs of tea. The emotional weight of the day seemed to catch up with Sarah all at once, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Thank you, she said quietly. Not just for letting me stay, but for... She gestured vaguely toward the stairs, encompassing the evening with the children, the shared dinner, the temporary feeling of belonging. They like you, Mark replied simply. They're good judges of character. Sarah traced the rim of her mug with one finger. I should start looking for a hotel tomorrow. I don't want to impose. Stay, Mark interrupted, surprising himself with the firmness of his tone. At least until you figure out your next steps. The kids would love it and... He hesitated, then continued honestly. It's been good having another adult in the house. Someone who understands children. Sarah looked at Emma's welcome drawing, now proudly displayed on the refrigerator. 4 figures in front of a house, a family. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Sarah woke before dawn, the unfamiliar shapes of the guest room gradually taking form in the grey light. On the bedside table, she found a notepad with Mark's morning schedule written in neat, precise handwriting. The breakfast routine mapped, out in 10-minute increments, told its own story of a man doing his best to keep his family running like clockwork. 6 a.m., wake up, start coffee. 6:10 a.m., wake kids. 6:20 a.m., breakfast prep. 6:30 a.m., ensure homework packed. 6:45 a.m., check for signed forms. 7 a.m., final teeth brushing. Check. 7:15 a.m., leave for school. 7:45 a.m., start work at garage. She studied the schedule, teacher's instincts already noting ways to smooth the transitions. The sound of Mark moving around downstairs drew her from her thoughts. Pulling on her sweater, she padded down to the kitchen. You're up early, Mark said, surprise evident in his voice as he measured coffee grounds. He looked tired. She wondered if he'd slept at all after taking care of everything yesterday. I'm used to early mornings. Kindergarten teachers have to beat the sunrise. She reached for a second coffee filter. Let me help. Mark hesitated only briefly before stepping aside to share the counter space. I usually make eggs and toast. Nothing fancy, but it fills them up until lunch. Sarah opened the refrigerator, taking stock. How about I handle breakfast while you get ready for work? I noticed your schedule upstairs. A flash of embarrassment crossed Mark's face. Sorry about that. I should have explained. No, it was helpful. She interrupted gently. Organization is important with kids. In my classroom, we use visual schedules all the time. Speaking of which, she pulled out eggs, milk, and the last few slices of bread. You're running low on groceries. Yeah, I meant to go shopping, but with everything yesterday... He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture betraying his fatigue. I could do that today, Sarah offered. Make a proper list, stock up on essentials. It's the least I can do. And honestly, it would help me feel useful. Before Mark could respond, thundering footsteps announced Jacob's arrival. He burst into the kitchen in mismatched pajamas, face lighting up when he saw Sarah. You're still here. I am, she smiled, cracking eggs into a bowl. How do you feel about French toast this morning? Really? Jacob bounced on his toes. Dad usually just makes regular toast because he says fancy breakfast takes too long. Well, I have a secret technique for quick French toast. Want to learn? By the time Emma appeared, drawn by the sweet smell of cinnamon and vanilla, Sarah had Jacob carefully dipping bread slices while she worked the stove. Mark watched from the doorway, already dressed for work, an unreadable expression on his face. Dad, look! Jacob proudly held up a perfectly soaked piece of bread. Miss Sarah showed me how to count to 5 while I dip it, so it doesn't get too soggy. Emma slid onto her usual chair, hair still tousled from sleep. It smells really good. She looked at Sarah tentatively. Would you braid my hair again? Before school? Of course, sweetheart. Let's get some breakfast in you first. The kitchen felt different this morning, warmer somehow, more alive. Sarah moved with natural efficiency, serving plates of French toast while simultaneously helping. Jacob found his missing homework folder and showing Emma a quick way to check if her math answers made sense. Mark sipped his coffee, watching his normally chaotic morning routine transform into something almost peaceful. Sarah seemed to anticipate needs before they arose, heading off potential crises with gentle redirections and calm suggestions. Dad? Emma's voice drew his attention. Is it okay if Miss Sarah takes us to school today? She said she could since it's on her way to get groceries. Mark glanced at Sarah, who quickly added, only if you're comfortable with it, of course. I just thought, since you mentioned being behind at work after missing your shift last night. He should have hesitated longer, should have worried more about entrusting his children to someone he'd known for less than 24 hours. But there was something about Sarah, her quiet competence, her genuine warmth, the way his children already looked at her with trust, that made the decision surprisingly easy. That would actually help a lot, he admitted. I could get to the garage early, catch up on some repairs. The smile Sarah gave him was worth any lingering doubts. As he prepared to leave, Sarah handed him a brown paper bag. "Lunch," she explained at his questioning look. "I made extra French toast. It's not much, but—" Mark couldn't remember the last time someone had packed him a lunch. The simple gesture hit him harder than he expected, and he had to clear his throat before speaking. "Thank you for everything this morning." "It's nothing," Sarah said softly. "Really. Being here, having something to do, people to take care of, it helps." They shared a look of understanding. Two people who knew what it meant to have their lives upended, to find unexpected comfort in helping others. Later, driving to work with the taste of cinnamon still on his tongue, Mark found himself thinking about the schedule he'd left for Sarah. So many mornings of trying to do everything himself, of working so hard to maintain perfect order because he feared what might happen if he let anything slip. But this morning, with Sarah's quiet presence in the kitchen, her gentle way with the children, her intuitive understanding of what needed to be done, for the first time in years, he'd felt the rigid structure of his life softening around the edges, making room for something new to grow. The parent permission form sat on the kitchen counter like a time bomb. "Riverdale Elementary School Family Science Night," read the bold header. "All students must be accompanied by a parent or guardian." Emma had placed it there 3 days ago, and Sarah had noticed her checking it each morning, watching her father's exhausted face and quietly putting it back without saying a word. Sarah found herself staring at the form while preparing dinner, her mind turning over possibilities. Mark's schedule was brutal this week. Extra hours at the garage to make up for the night shift he'd missed, plus his regular security work. She knew Emma desperately wanted to go. The girl had been studying twice as hard in science lately, proud of her growing understanding of the solar system. "Miss Sarah?" Emma's voice startled her from her thoughts. "Could you help me with my science project? It's about the planets, and I want it to be really good for science night, even if—" She trailed off, eyes darting to the permission slip. "Of course, sweetheart." Sarah pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. "Show me what you're working on." They spread Emma's materials across the table: construction paper, markers, a bag of styrofoam balls, and carefully printed note cards about each planet. Sarah recognized the extra effort Emma had put in, the meticulous attention to detail that spoke of a child trying to prove herself worthy of attention. "My teacher says we can bring someone other than our parents," Emma said carefully, painting a small ball red for Mars. "Like a grandparent or someone else who takes care of us." Sarah's heart squeezed. She understood what Emma wasn't asking, what she was too afraid to request directly. Before she could respond, Jacob burst in from the backyard. "Miss Sarah, I did it. I got all my times tables right on the practice sheet." He thrust a paper toward her, grinning proudly. The worksheet was covered in his careful handwriting, each answer marked with a small star, their secret reward system. "That's wonderful." Sarah examined the sheet with appropriate gravity. "Look at how neat your numbers are, too. Should we show your dad when he gets home? Can we put it on the fridge? Next to my soccer picture?" "Absolutely. Emma, would you like to display your planet drawings, too?" As she helped the children arrange their work on the refrigerator, now a colorful gallery of their achievements, Sarah thought about how much had changed in the past week. The permission slip still waited on the counter, but it no longer felt like a problem without a solution. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Sarah broached the subject with Mark. He sat at the kitchen table, bills spread before him, his face tight with concentration. "Emma's science night is next Thursday," she began gently. Mark's shoulders slumped. "I know, I saw the form. I've been trying to swap shifts, but with covering for Joe's vacation at the garage, I could take her, Sarah offered. The form says parents or guardians, and I'm certified as a teacher. They'd allow it? Mark looked up, hope and hesitation warring in his expression. You'd do that? Of course. Emma's worked so hard on her project, and Sarah took a deep breath. I've been thinking. I should start contributing if I'm staying longer. Maybe I could help more with school things? I'm good at it, being a teacher, and the kids seem to... Yes, Mark interrupted, then softer. Yes, please. They love having you here. I love... He stopped, cleared his throat. It helps. Having you here helps. The next morning, Sarah packed their lunches while the kids got ready for school. She'd started adding small notes, a joke for Jacob, an encouraging message for Emma. Today, she slipped something extra into Emma's bag, the permission slip, signed with both Mark's name and her own, listing her as additional guardian. When Emma discovered it at lunch, her radiant smile lit up the entire cafeteria. She showed it to her best friend Jenny, who immediately demanded to know who Miss Sarah was. By the end of the day, Emma's teacher, Mrs. Harrison, requested a meeting. I just want to understand the situation, Mrs. Harrison said kindly, as Sarah sat across from her desk. Emma's been talking about you all week, and her homework performance has improved dramatically. Sarah explained as simply as she could, leaving out the more painful details of her own story. To her relief, Mrs. Harrison seemed more concerned with Emma's well-being than with judging their unconventional arrangement. She's different lately, the teacher observed, more confident, and Jacob's teacher mentioned he's suddenly mastered his multiplication tables. We've been practicing, Sarah said. He responds well to positive reinforcement and games. Mrs. Harrison smiled. You sound like a teacher. Kindergarten. At least, I was. I'm between positions right now. Really? Mrs. Harrison's eyes lit up. We have an opening in second grade for next semester. Our Mrs. Peters is retiring in December. Sarah felt a flutter of excitement, quickly tempered by uncertainty. Taking a job at the children's school would make this temporary arrangement feel more permanent. But wasn't that what she wanted? What they all seemed to want? That night, helping Emma put the finishing touches on her solar system model, Sarah watched the girl carefully label each planet's orbit. Emma's tongue stuck out slightly as she concentrated, a habit Sarah had noticed she shared with her father. Miss Sarah? Emma asked, not looking up from her work. Jenny asked if you're going to be like a new mom for us. Sarah's breath caught. What did you tell her? I said you're just Miss Sarah, and that's enough. Emma finally met her eyes. Right? Sarah pulled the girl into a gentle hug, careful not to disturb the freshly painted planets. Right. I'm just Miss Sarah, and I'm here as long as you want me to be. Later, she added her own star chart to the refrigerator gallery, a simple schedule of homework times, reading periods, and study sessions. Unlike Mark's precise morning schedule, this one had room for adjustments, for spontaneous science experiments and impromptu multiplication games. Room for life to happen, for love to grow, for a family to heal. The family movie night schedule appeared on the refrigerator Saturday morning, written in Sarah's neat teacher's handwriting. It listed not just movies, but a whole weekend of simple activities. Saturday morning, pancake-making contest, afternoon. Park and soccer practice evening, movie and popcorn. Sunday, French toast, Jacob's turn to help. Board games, backyard picnic, weather permitting. Mark studied the schedule over his morning coffee, noting how she'd worked around his weekend security shift. More importantly, she'd included activities that cost nothing, a consideration he hadn't mentioned, but she'd somehow understood. Can we start the pancake contest now? Jacob hopped from foot to foot, already wearing his Kiss the Cook apron, a garage sale find from last summer. I want to make mine look like a soccer ball. Let your sister wake up first, Sarah replied, measuring flour into bowls. She'd set up 3 stations at the kitchen counter, each with its own supplies. And remember, presentation counts as much as taste. Emma appeared soon after, drawn by the sounds and smells of breakfast preparation. Her eyes lit up at the sight of the cooking stations. "Are those blueberries? And chocolate chips? And bananas?" Sarah confirmed. "Your dad's going to be our judge when he finishes his coffee." Mark raised his mug in acknowledgement, hiding his smile. After years of rushed weekends, juggling chores and obligations, watching his children jump into this simple activity felt like a gift. The pancake competition turned serious quickly. Emma methodically arranged blueberries in a spiral pattern, while Jacob attempted increasingly abstract soccer ball designs. Sarah's station remained conspicuously unused. "Aren't you competing?" Mark asked. "I'm the referee," she replied with a wink. "Someone has to make sure there's no chocolate chip stealing between contestants." "That was one time," Jacob protested, chocolate evident on his chin. The morning passed in a blur of laughter and creative culinary attempts. Mark awarded Emma first place for presentation. The blueberry spiral shows excellent mathematical thinking, and Jacob first place for enthusiasm. "Soccer balls aren't usually purple, but I admire your imagination." Both children insisted Sarah make them her special pancakes afterward, having heard about her French toast success. "We should do this every weekend," Jacob declared, syrup dripping down his chin. "Like a tradition." Mark watched Sarah's expression carefully, but she showed no sign of discomfort at the suggestion of long-term plans. Instead, she was already helping Emma clean up her station, showing her how to safely handle the warm pan. "First soccer practice." With Miss Sarah watching, Jacob announced as they drove to the park later that morning, "I'm going to score 5 goals." The local park was busy with weekend activities: soccer practice, a birthday party near the playground, elderly couples walking the path around the pond. Sarah settled on a blanket with Emma, who had brought her science project to work on, between cheering for her brother. Mark jogged over during a water break, his assistant coach position keeping him busy with the team of energetic 7-year-olds. "Everything okay here?" "Perfect," Sarah replied, helping Emma attach rings to represent Saturn. "Though I think you have a future astronaut on your hands." "Dad, did you know that Saturn's rings are made of ice and rock?" Emma's newfound confidence in science made her eyes sparkle. "Miss Sarah helped me find a website with real pictures from space." A soccer ball rolled their way, followed by Jacob's shout, "Dad, break's over! Duty calls." Mark grinned, jogging back to the field. Sarah watched him organize the children into practice drills, his patience evident in every interaction. "Your dad's good with kids," she observed to Emma. "He tries really hard." Emma replied, her young voice carrying unexpected weight. "Sometimes too hard, I think. But he's different now that you're here. More relaxed." "Out of the mouths of babes," Sarah thought, touched by Emma's perception. The afternoon mellowed into evening, and they returned home pleasantly tired. While Mark showered before his night shift, Sarah helped the children set up for movie night. They transformed the living room with pillows and blankets, Jakob insisting on building a proper movie fort. "I wish Dad didn't have to work tonight," Jacob said, arranging his stuffed animals in the fort. "Me too, buddy. But you know what? Tomorrow's his day off, and I saw board games on Miss Sarah's schedule." Mark appeared in the doorway, his security uniform freshly pressed. "Be good for her, okay?" "We will," the children chorused. Sarah walked him to the door while the kids debated movie choices. "I put some dinner in a container for you," she said quietly. "It's in the fridge." Mark paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Sarah, thank you for all of this. The kids haven't had a weekend like this since—" "I know," she touched his arm gently. "Go on, we've got everything covered here. Just come back safe." When Mark returned at midnight, the house was quiet but not dark. A small lamp glowed in the living room, where he found Sarah reading in his favorite armchair. The kids were asleep in their fort, surrounded by the remains of their movie night. "They insisted on waiting up for you," she whispered. "Made it through one movie and half of another." Mark knelt to brush a kiss on each sleeping forehead, his heart full. "How was it?" Perfect. Jacob talked through the entire first movie, explaining all the characters. Emma made sure he used his indoor voice every 3 minutes. She stood, stretching. There's hot chocolate in the kitchen if you want some. They sat at the kitchen table, sharing comfortable silence over steaming mugs. The weekend schedule still held pride of place on the refrigerator, surrounded by pancake-making photos Sarah had taken with her phone. I meant to ask, Mark said finally, about the teaching position Mrs. Harrison mentioned. Sarah cupped her hands around her mug. I have an interview next week. If that's okay, I know it would make this all feel more permanent. I think permanent sounds pretty good. Mark reached across the table, his hand finding hers. The kids agree, by the way. Jacob's already planning next weekend's pancake designs. Sarah's fingers tightened around his. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, but inside their kitchen, their home, everything felt warm, safe, and finally wonderfully right. Sarah discovered the old recipe book on a quiet Tuesday afternoon while reorganizing the kitchen cabinets. Its spine was cracked, pages yellow with age, and familiar handwriting filled the margins. Helen Anderson's Kitchen, read the faded cover, and below it, for my son, Mark, with love. She traced the handwritten notes gently. Mark's favorite chocolate chip cookies, Jacob's first birthday cake. Emma loves this mac and cheese. A mother's legacy preserved in ingredient lists and cooking instructions, telling the story of a family through its meals. That was my mom's. Mark's voice came from behind her. He'd come home early from the garage, grease still staining his hands. She passed away just before Jacob was born. Never got to meet him. Sarah carefully opened the book to a random page. These recipes, they're loved, well used. Drops of vanilla extract stained one corner, a dusting of flour still clung to another. She taught me to cook when I was young, said every man should know how to feed his family. Mark leaned against the counter, eyes distant with memory. After she died, I tried to keep making her recipes, but with work and everything, lately it's been more about quick and easy. Sarah studied a recipe for homemade bread, the margins filled with Helen's careful notes about rise times and kneading techniques. Would you mind if I tried some of these? Added a few of my own, maybe? Mark's smile was soft, genuine. I think Mom would have liked that. That evening, the kitchen filled with the smell of fresh bread baking. Emma perched on a stool, watching Sarah knead dough the way Helen's notes described. Did you have a recipe book at your old house? She asked. I did. My grandmother's. Sarah kept her voice light, though the thought of her abandoned kitchen still ached. She taught me to make pierogies when I was about your age. What are pierogies? Polish dumplings. My grandmother's family brought the recipe from the old country. Sarah began shaping the bread dough. Would you like to learn how to make them? Emma nodded eagerly. Could we write it in Grandma Helen's book, so we don't forget? Sarah paused, hands covered in flour. The question felt weighty, important. We should ask your dad first. It's a special book. Ask me what? Mark appeared in the kitchen doorway, Jacob trailing behind him with a math worksheet. Emma explained about the pierogies, her enthusiasm making the words tumble out quickly. Mark looked at Sarah, then at his mother's recipe book, understanding the unspoken question. I think, he said carefully, that recipe books are meant to grow with families. Mom would want us to add new memories. That weekend, they made pierogies. Together. Sarah taught Emma how to roll the dough just so, showed Jacob how to crimp the edges properly. Mark watched them work, occasionally consulting Helen's book for other recipes they could try. My mom would have loved this, he said quietly. To Sarah, as the kids argued good-naturedly over filling choices, seeing the kitchen full of life again. Sarah added her pierogi recipe to the book that evening, her handwriting joining Helen's on the well-worn pages. She included notes about Emma's perfect rolling technique and Jacob's creative filling suggestions. Below it, she started a new section, Family Favorites. The recipe book became a bridge between past and present. Sarah would find a recipe of Helen's and adapt it slightly, a little more garlic here, a new spice there. Each success was documented, each modification noted. The children began requesting specific dishes from both grandmothers' collections. "Can we have Grandma Helen's cookies and Miss Sarah's pierogies?" became a common refrain. One evening, helping Emma with her homework, while a casserole baked, Helen's recipe with Sarah's vegetable additions, Sarah noticed Mark studying the recipe book again. "Mom used to say you could tell a family's story through their recipe book," he said. "The special occasion dishes, the everyday meals, the comfort foods for hard times. They all mean something." Sarah understood. The book had become more than a collection of recipes. It was a family history, a record of love expressed through nourishment and care. Helen's notes about young Mark's preferences sat alongside Sarah's observations about his children's tastes. The past and present mingled on its pages like ingredients in a well-loved recipe. "Miss Sarah?" Jacob tugged at her sleeve. "Can we make Grandma Helen's hot chocolate, the one with the secret ingredient?" "Cinnamon," Mark supplied with a smile. "Though it was supposed to stay a secret, we could make it even more special," Sarah suggested. "Maybe add some whipped cream, start our own secret ingredient tradition." Jacob's eyes lit up. "Can I pick the secret ingredient?" "As long as it's not ketchup," Emma warned, making them all laugh. Later that night, after the children were in bed, Sarah added a new note to the hot chocolate recipe. Jacob's innovation: mini marshmallows shaped into soccer balls. Emma suggests whipped cream mountains, our new family tradition, ST 2025. Mark found her there, adding the finishing touches to her note. He read it over her shoulder, then reached past her to write his own addition, perfect for celebrating new beginnings. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. In the margin of the recipe book, their handwriting intertwined just as their lives had begun to do. Helen's elegant script, Mark's precise notes, and now Sarah's teacher-neat additions, 3 generations of care and love preserved in paper and ink. "Your mom," Sarah said softly. "She made this house a home through these recipes. I hope it's okay that I'm adding to her legacy." Mark's hand found hers, warm and sure. "You're not just adding to it, you're helping it grow into something new, something more." He paused, then added quietly, "Something that feels right." The recipe book lay open between them, its pages bearing witness to a family's evolution, from Helen's first notes to her son, through years of Mark's single parenthood, to this new chapter they were writing together. Each recipe told part of their story, where they'd been, who they'd lost, what they'd found, and most importantly, who they were becoming together. The church bulletin lay open on Sarah's desk in the teacher's lounge, its crisp pages carrying more than just announcements. Between notices for the bake sale and prayer circle meetings, whispered conversations hung in the air. "Did you hear about Mark Anderson? Took in that runaway bride, living together with his children. What will people think?" Sarah had started her new position at Riverdale Elementary 2 weeks ago, teaching 2nd grade down the hall from Emma's classroom. The transition had been smooth, her experience and natural rapport with children earning quick respect from colleagues. But today, catching snippets of conversation as she prepared for afternoon classes, she felt the weight of community scrutiny. "Sarah?" Linda Matthews, the school secretary, appeared in the doorway. No relation to Sarah, but she'd made that connection several times, perhaps hoping to uncover some family scandal. "Pastor Mike asked me to give you this. Said you left some personal items at the church?" The box Linda held contained Sarah's wedding album, empty now, never filled, and a few cards that had been left behind that day. Sarah accepted it with quiet dignity. "Thank you. I was wondering where these had gone." Linda lingered, curiosity evident. "You know, my sister runs a lovely women's shelter in Millbrook. If you need somewhere more appropriate to stay." "I'm exactly where I need to be, Linda, but thank you for your concern." Sarah's tone was gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. As Linda retreated, Barbara Harrison, Emma's teacher and now Sarah's colleague, took the seat beside her. "Don't let them get to you," she said quietly. "Small towns talk, but they come around when they see what's real." Sarah managed to smile. "It's not me I'm worried about. Mark and the children, they've been through enough without becoming gossip fodder. Those kids are thriving," Barbara pointed out. "Emma's confidence has soared, and Jacob's practically floating through his multiplication tests. Anyone who can't see the good in that needs to check their priorities." The afternoon brought parent-teacher conferences, including a meeting with Mrs. Peterson, their elderly neighbor who'd been first to witness Sarah's arrival. The woman settled into the small chair with surprising grace. "Now, Mrs. Peterson began, I'm not here about my grandson Tommy, though he's doing wonderfully in your class. I wanted to tell you about Helen Anderson, Mark's mother." Sarah straightened, caught off guard by the mention of Mark's mom. "Helen was my dearest friend," Mrs. Peterson continued. "She worried about Mark after his wife left, feared he'd close himself off, try to do everything alone. But she always said the right person would come along, someone who'd see the goodness in him, love those children like her own." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes. "I'm not trying to replace anyone. Of course not, dear. You're creating something new. Helen would have understood that. She'd have loved seeing her kitchen full of baking and laughter again." Word of their situation had reached the garage where Mark worked too. His boss, Tony, pulled him aside one afternoon. "Look, Mark, you know I don't get involved in employees' personal lives, but my wife says your kids are different lately. Happier." Mark tensed, preparing for judgment. "All I'm saying is, whatever you're doing, it's working. And if anyone gives you grief about it, send them my way." Tony clapped him on the shoulder. "Now, about that transmission fluid leak, not everyone was as understanding." The PTA meeting that Thursday crackled with tension when Sarah volunteered to coordinate the fall festival. Judith Winters, who'd held the position for 5 years, voiced her concerns with sugary venom. "We need someone stable," she emphasized. "Someone with firm roots in the community, traditional family values." Before Sarah could respond, 3 other teachers jumped to her defense. Barbara Harrison's voice rose above the others. "I can't think of anyone who values family more than Sarah. She's got my vote." The tide began to turn, slowly but surely. It helped that Sarah and Mark never hid, never acted ashamed. They attended Jacob's soccer games together, sat with Emma at church, did their grocery shopping as a family. People watched them build their unconventional life with quiet dignity and genuine love. Support came from unexpected quarters. The local coffee shop owner started keeping Sarah's favorite tea in stock. The librarian saved science books she thought Emma would enjoy. The hardware store gave Mark a heads up when children's bikes went on sale. Even Pastor Mike, who'd witnessed Sarah's darkest moment, spoke up during a sermon about modern families. "Love," he said, looking directly at their usual pew, "doesn't always follow traditional paths. Sometimes God's greatest gifts come to us through unexpected doors." One evening, helping Emma sell Girl Scout cookies outside the grocery store, Sarah overheard 2 women discussing their family. "Did you know she was left at the altar?" the first whispered. "Yes. But have you seen how good she is with his children? My Tommy's in her class, says she's the best teacher he's ever had. And Mark Anderson, when was the last time you saw him smile so much? Still, living together without being married? Oh, hush. They're doing right by those kids. That's what matters." Emma tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Miss Sarah, can we go home soon? Dad's making Grandma Helen's lasagna, and he said he needs your help with the secret ingredient." Sarah hugged her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry. "Shampoo? Of course, sweetie. Home sounds perfect." Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Mark found Sarah adding a new recipe to his mother's book. "Rough day?" he asked, noting her thoughtful expression. "Just processing. The town has opinions about us." "They always will." He sat beside her. "Does it bother you?" Sarah looked around the kitchen, at Jacob's art on the fridge, Emma's science. Ribbon, the calendar full of their shared life. "No," she realized. "What we're building here, it's real. It's right. People will see that eventually. They already are," Mark said softly. "Mrs. Peterson brought over a pie today. Said it was her welcome to the neighborhood gift, only 3 months late." Sarah laughed, the sound warming the kitchen. Outside, their small town continued its debate about the unconventional family on Cedar Street. But inside, where it mattered, love was taking root and growing stronger every day. The custody agreement had sat undisturbed in Mark's desk drawer for 3 years, its legal language spelling out Claire's rights to visitation, rights she'd never once exercised. Now the document lay open on the kitchen table, like an unwelcome guest, its presence casting a shadow over their Sunday morning pancake tradition. "She called this morning," Mark said quietly, while the children played in the backyard. Sarah could see them through the window. Emma pushing Jacob on the tire. Swing, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension in the kitchen. "Claire wants to see them, says she's changed, gotten her life together." Sarah's hands stilled over the pancake batter. She'd known this day might come, had even helped Emma work through her feelings about her absent mother during quiet conversations, over homework, but the reality of it twisted something in her chest. "What did you tell her?" "That I needed to think about it, talk to the kids." Mark ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as a sign of deep distress. "She's living in Portland now, has a gallery showing coming up, says she wants them to see her work, see the life she's built." The life she'd built without them, Sarah thought but didn't say. Instead, she asked, "When?" "Next weekend. She's flying in for the gallery opening." Mark's fingers traced the edges of the custody agreement. "According to this, I can't legally stop her from seeing them. But after everything, I don't know if I trust her not to hurt them again." Sarah watched Emma demonstrate a proper swing-pushing technique to her brother, her small face serious with responsibility. "They're stronger now than they were 3 years ago. But you're right to be cautious." "Miss Sarah," Jacob's voice carried through the open window. "Can we have chocolate chips in our pancakes?" "Coming, buddy," she called back, then turned to Mark. "We should tell them together after breakfast." The news landed like a stone in still water, ripples of emotion spreading across both children's faces. Emma, old enough to remember her mother's departure, went very still. Jacob, who had few memories of Claire, looked confused. "Do we have to go?" Emma asked, her voice small. "No, sweetheart," Mark assured her quickly. "Not if you don't want to. But your mom, she would like to show you her art gallery. Tell you about her life." "What about Miss Sarah?" Jacob clutched his stuffed soccer ball, a security blanket in plush form. "Will she come too?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Sarah felt the weight of 3 pairs of eyes on her, each carrying different hopes and fears. "I think," she said carefully, "this should be just you and your mom, but I'll be right here when you get back, if you decide to go." Emma's face crumpled slightly. "Promise?" "Promise." The week leading up to Claire's visit was tense. Emma threw herself into schoolwork with unprecedented intensity, while Jacob asked increasingly detailed questions about a mother he barely remembered. Sarah maintained their routines, homework help, bedtime stories, daily hugs, trying to provide stability amid the emotional turbulence. Claire arrived on Saturday morning in a whirl of designer perfume and artistic enthusiasm. She was still beautiful, Sarah thought, watching through the kitchen window as Mark walked the children to her rental car. Still carried herself with that ethereal quality that probably served her well in the art world. "They look so grown up," Claire's voice drifted through the open window. "Emma, darling, your hair is gorgeous. And Jacob, you're practically a young man." Sarah turned away from the window, focusing on cleaning up breakfast dishes that were already clean. She had no right to the ache in her chest, no claim to the children beyond what love had built over these past months. The day stretched endlessly. Sarah baked 3 batches of cookies, reorganized the pantry, and started a complicated dinner. She knew the children probably wouldn't be home to eat. Mark paced, checked his phone, and finally sat heavily at the kitchen table. "Talk to me," Sarah said softly. "What are you afraid of?" "That she'll promise them things she can't deliver." That she'll sweep in with her exciting artist's life and make them feel like ours is small. That she'll leave again, and I'll have to watch them hurt all over. Sarah covered his hand with hers. Your life with them isn't small, Mark. It's built on love and commitment and showing up every single day. They know that. The sound of a car in the driveway came earlier than expected. Emma burst through the door first, her face tear-stained but determined. She went straight to Sarah, wrapping her arms around her waist. Jacob followed more slowly, looking confused and slightly overwhelmed. Claire appeared in the doorway, elegant even in apparent distress. They wanted to come home, she said, her voice tight. Emma said they had plans with family. The word hung between them, sharp as broken glass. We always make cookies on Saturdays, Jacob explained earnestly. Miss Sarah teaches us about fractions while we measure stuff. I see. Claire's gaze swept the kitchen, taking in the evidence of their shared life. Artwork on the fridge, the family calendar, Sarah's recipe book open on the counter. Mark, could we talk privately? In Mark's home office, Claire got straight to the point. You've built a whole new family without even telling me. You left, Mark replied simply. You didn't want to be part of their lives, Sarah. She chose them, chooses them every day, and they clearly adore her. Claire's laugh held a bitter edge. Emma wouldn't stop talking about Miss Sarah this, and Miss Sarah that. Do you know what she said when I showed her my gallery photos? She asked if I had any pictures of them, of their life here. I didn't even know Jacob played soccer. What did you expect, Claire? That they'd put their lives on hold, waiting for you to remember they exist? In the kitchen, Sarah helped the children measure ingredients for another batch of cookies, their familiar rhythm settling their nerves. Emma worked with particular focus, her movements precise. We saw Mum's paintings, she said finally. They're beautiful, but she looked up at Sarah, eyes swimming with tears and wisdom beyond her years. They're not home. This is home. When Mark and Claire emerged, something had shifted. Claire's artistic polish had cracked slightly, revealing the weight of her choices. I'd like to write to them, she said. Send birthday cards, maybe, if that's okay. That's up to them, Mark answered, watching his children work alongside Sarah in the kitchen. But they need consistency, Claire, not just when it's convenient. After Claire left, the family of four stood in their kitchen, the smell of fresh cookies filling the air. Jacob broke the silence. Can we have hot chocolate with our cookies, with Miss Sarah's secret ingredient? And can we watch a movie? Emma added. All of us together? Mark met Sarah's eyes over their children's heads. That sounds perfect, he said. That's exactly what family does. The job application for lead elementary education coordinator sat on Sarah's desk, its promise of advancement both thrilling and terrifying. The position would mean more responsibility, better pay, and the chance to shape curriculum across grade levels. But it would also mean longer hours, more meetings, less time for after-school homework help, and impromptu science experiments with Emma. You should go for it, Barbara Harrison said during lunch break, glancing at the application. They'd be lucky to have you. Besides, you've practically been doing the job already, the way you've revolutionized the second-grade reading program. Sarah stirred her tea thoughtfully. The past few months of teaching had brought her back to life in ways she hadn't expected. Her classroom had become a haven of creativity and learning, her students thriving under her guidance. But her greatest joy remained those precious after-school hours with Emma and Jacob, watching them grow and learn in their own unique ways. That evening, she found Mark in the garage, tinkering with Jacob's bike chain. Can we talk? He looked up, immediately noting her serious expression. Everything okay? She handed him the job application, watching as he read it. It's a big opportunity, she explained. But it would change things. Our routines, the time. I have with the kids. Mark was quiet for a moment, his hands still on the bike chain. Sarah, you've put so much of yourself into caring for us. Maybe it's time we supported your dreams too. But the children are secure enough now to handle some changes. He smiled. Besides, imagine how proud they'll be, telling everyone. Their Miss Sarah is in charge of the whole elementary program. The children's reactions surprised her. Emma immediately started planning how they could reorganize the homework schedule, while Jacob simply asked if she'd still be able to make it to his soccer games. "I'll make it work," Sarah promised. "Some things are too important to miss." That night, updating their family calendar with potential meeting times and schedule adjustments, Sarah realized something profound. She hadn't lost her dreams in the aftermath of that failed wedding day. She'd found better ones, deeper ones, dreams that encompassed not just her own growth, but the growth of this family she'd come to cherish. She submitted the application the next morning. As she dropped it on the principal's desk, she thought about the twists and turns that had led her here. 6 months ago, she'd been a bride without a groom, her future shattered. Now she was a teacher, a caregiver, a crucial part of a family that had chosen her as much as she'd chosen them. The principal smiled warmly. "I was hoping you'd apply. We need more educators who understand that teaching isn't just about lessons. It's about building connections, nurturing growth, rather like what you've done with your own family." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at those words. Your own family. Because that's what they had become, through pancake contests and homework sessions, through tears and laughter, through daily choices to love and support each other. Walking back to her classroom, she passed Emma in the hallway. Her daughter, and in her heart, that's what Emma had become, beamed and whispered, "Did you turn it in?" "I did," Sarah whispered back. "Thank you for believing in me." "That's what family does," Emma replied, with the simple wisdom of children. "We believe in each other." Sarah watched her skip away, pigtails bouncing, and knew that whatever came next, new job or not, they would face it together. Their unconventional family had taught her that the best dreams aren't the ones we plan, but the ones that find us when we're brave enough to open our hearts to unexpected possibilities. The family photo caught them in a moment of perfect chaos. Jacob mid-laugh, his Santa hat askew, Emma carefully adjusting the menorah she'd made in art class, Mark trying to untangle Christmas lights, and Sarah, flour on her cheek from baking. Helen's traditional sugar cookies. Mrs. Peterson had snapped it without warning during their holiday decorating afternoon, capturing the genuine joy of their blended celebrations. "I love that we do both," Emma declared, helping Sarah hang stockings, including a new one they'd chosen together at the craft store. Hanukkah from Mum's side, Christmas from Dad's, and now we have Miss Sarah's Polish Christmas traditions too. The holiday season had brought its challenges. Claire sent carefully chosen art books as gifts, which the children accepted with polite thanks. Mark's parents struggled with how to address Sarah in their holiday cards, finally settling on, "To our dear Sarah and the family." Sarah's own parents had declined their invitation for Christmas dinner, still nursing their disappointment over her impulsive decisions. But in their home, magic bloomed. Sarah taught the children to make pierogies for Christmas Eve, a tradition from her grandmother. They hung ornaments from Mark's childhood alongside newly crafted ones, each with its own story. Every evening of Hanukkah, Emma proudly lit her handmade menorah, remembering the prayers Claire had taught her years ago. Family traditions are like recipes, Sarah explained while they decorated Helen's sugar cookies. You keep the ones that matter, add new ones that feel right, and create something uniquely yours. The season's highlight came unexpectedly. During the school holiday concert, Jacob forgot the words to Silent Night, but confidently belted out the Polish carol Sarah had taught him. Emma's class presentation on holiday traditions around the world included a proud description of their family's multicultural celebrations. That evening, hanging the impromptu family photo on their tree, Sarah felt Mark's arms slip around her waist. "You know what I wish for this Christmas?" he murmured. "What's that?" "That we never stop making new traditions together." Sarah leaned back against him, watching their children arrange presents under the tree, some wrapped in Christmas paper, some in Hanukkah blue and silver, all chosen with love. "I think," she said softly, "that's one wish that's already coming true." The children's drawing appeared on Sarah's classroom desk early one spring morning. A crayon masterpiece showing 4 stick figures holding hands in front of a house. "Our Family," read the title in Emma's careful handwriting, with "By Emma and Jacob Anderson" printed below. But it was the speech bubbles above each figure that made Sarah's heart skip. "Will you marry us?" She turned to find her classroom doorway filled with her family. Jacob bounced on his toes, barely containing his excitement. Emma stood tall and proud, while Mark dropped to one knee, holding not a ring box, but Helen's recipe book. "The kids helped me plan this," Mark said softly. "We thought about fancy restaurants or the park where we spend our Saturdays. But this classroom, this is where you teach, where you help children grow, where you became part of our community, just like our kitchen is where you helped us become a family." He opened the recipe book to a new page titled, "A Recipe for Forever," in 3 different handwritings, Mark's, Emma's and Jacob's wobbly letters. They had written ingredients: 1 loving heart, yours; 3 grateful souls, ours; countless shared memories, a lifetime of new traditions; daily sprinkles of laughter; infinite patience, especially during soccer practice; endless supply of hope mix well with trust and understanding; bake in the warmth of family love; serve daily with generous portions of joy. Sarah Matthews, Mark continued, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You walked into our lives on what should have been the worst day of yours. Instead, you turned it into the beginning of something beautiful. The kids and I talked about this a lot, about what it means to choose each other every day. Will you choose us officially and forever? Will you marry me?" Jacob couldn't contain himself any longer. "Say yes, Miss Sarah. I already learned to write Anderson after my name." Emma elbowed him gently. "We're supposed to let her answer first." Sarah looked at the drawing, the recipe book, the 3 eager faces before her. Here was her family, not the one she'd planned, but the one she'd found, the one that had chosen her as completely as she'd chosen them. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes!" The children rushed forward first, enveloping her in a group hug. Mark joined them, and for a moment they stood together, their joy witnessed by the empty chairs and bright artwork of her classroom. "I added a blank page after the recipe," Emma said proudly, "for you to write down how it actually happened. And I drew more pictures for the wedding album." Jacob pulled papers from his backpack. "Look, this one's us having cake." Mark slipped a simple ring on her finger, not a diamond, but a warm gold band engraved with tiny cooking symbols, a whisk, a spoon, a rolling pin. "Mom's ring," he explained. "She always said it should go to someone who understood that love is about nourishing hearts as well as bodies." The morning bell rang, startling them all. Soon Sarah's students would arrive, full of energy and questions about why their teacher's family was in the classroom. "We should go," Mark said, but Sarah held them for one more moment. "Thank you," she said, "for making me part of your recipe." Later that day, she added her own entry to Helen's book. The secret ingredient was always love. The backyard layout sketch grew more elaborate each day as the children added their ideas. A flower arch by the old oak tree, twinkle lights strung from branches, paths lined with mason jar candles. What had started as a simple diagram on graph paper had become a family art project, with Emma's careful measurements and Jacob's enthusiastic decorating suggestions merging into a plan that was perfectly them. "We don't need a fancy venue," Sarah had insisted when Mark worried about their modest budget. "The backyard is where we had our first family movie night, where we stargazed during science lessons, where Jacob practiced his soccer kicks. It's already special." The community rallied around them in unexpected ways. Mrs. Peterson volunteered her prize-winning roses for the flower arch. Barbara Harrison organized other teachers to help with decorations. Even Tony from the garage offered to string the lights, claiming he needed the practice for his own daughter's future wedding. "Miss Sarah," Emma asked one evening as they reviewed the layout. "Can I add something to the plan?" She pointed to a spot near the arch. "I think we should put Grandma Helen's recipe book here on a little table, since it's kind of where everything started." Sarah hugged her close. "That's perfect, sweetheart." The wedding preparations became a lesson in what really mattered. Instead of expensive centerpieces, they would use potted herbs that guests could take home, a living reminder of how love grows. Rather than formal favors, they planned to give out recipe cards featuring family favorites from both Helen's collection and Sarah's Polish traditions. Jacob took his role as ring-bearer seriously, practicing his walk down the makeshift aisle with solemn concentration. "I'm not going to run or skip," he promised, "even if I see a really interesting bug." Emma, who would scatter flower petals from Mrs. Peterson's roses, spent hours working with Sarah on a surprise, learning to play Heart and Soul on the old piano they'd inherited from Helen, a duet they would perform at the reception. Mark found Sarah one evening, studying their growing collection of RSVPs. "Having any second thoughts?" he asked softly, "about not having the big church wedding?" She thought about that other wedding day, the elaborate plans that had crumbled. "You know what I remember most about that morning? Feeling alone, even in a room full of people. But here," she gestured to their backyard, where the children were measuring spaces between mason jars with a ruler, their faces serious with purpose. "Here, I've never felt more surrounded by real love." The layout gained one final addition, a small memory table, where they would place photos of Helen, Sarah's grandmother, and others who couldn't be there physically but remained in their hearts. Emma carefully added a drawing of the table to their plan, complete with tiny picture frames sketched in loving detail. "It's going to be perfect," she declared, surveying their completed layout, "because we're all building it together." Sarah looked at their backyard through the kitchen window, the ordinary space that would soon witness their extraordinary moment. The old oak tree that had sheltered their family picnics would now shade their vows. The garden where they taught Jacob about growing things would bloom with wedding flowers. The patch of grass where they spread blankets for stargazing would hold chairs for their loved ones. They were transforming their everyday space into something magical, just as they had transformed their separate lives into one shared story. And like everything else in their journey, they were doing it together, one careful plan, one loving choice at a time. The handmade wedding album began with a photo of dawn breaking over their backyard. Morning light filtered through the old oak's leaves, catching the dew on Mrs. Peterson's roses and making the mason jar candles sparkle like captured stars. Emma had insisted on taking the picture herself, wanting to document every moment of their perfect day. Sarah stood at the kitchen window, already in her simple ivory dress, not a formal wedding gown, but a sundress that made her feel like herself. Behind her, she could hear Jacob practicing his ring-bearer walk one final time, his dress shoes tapping a careful rhythm on the hardwood floor. "Mom," Emma's voice was tentative, testing the word she'd chosen for this day. "Can I help you with your hair?" Sarah turned, tears threatening at this first use of the title. "I'd love that, sweetheart." As Emma wove flowers into her hair, a skill learned from countless morning braiding sessions, Sarah watched their guests arriving through the window. They settled into chairs along the candle-lit paths, their faces bright with genuine joy. Pasta. Mike chatted with Barbara Harrison near the flower arch. Tony from the garage helped Mrs. Peterson to her seat of honor in the front row. Mark and Jacob waited beneath the oak tree, both in blue shirts that matched the morning sky. The recipe book held pride of place on its small table, open to the recipe for forever that had started this final chapter. The piano notes of Heart and Soul drifted through the open window, a recording of Emma's surprise duet with Sarah, now serving as their wedding music. Jacob began his careful walk, ring pillow held steady. Emma followed, scattering rose petals with artistic precision. When Sarah stepped into her backyard, the morning light caught her mother's vintage locket, her something old, making it gleam, but it was the sight of her family waiting for her that took her breath away. Mark's loving gaze, Jacob's proud grin, Emma's radiant smile. Their vows were simple, spoken from the heart. They promised to choose each other every day, to nurture their love like the herbs in their garden, to write new recipes for happiness together. When Pastor Mike pronounced them a family, Jacob was the first to cheer. The first photo in their album showed the dawn. The last captured them in the same spot at dusk. Sarah and Mark sharing a quiet moment while the children danced with their friends among the twinkling lights. Between these images lay the story of their day, not just a wedding, but a celebration of the family they had become. Emma added a final touch to the album's first page, a pressed rose petal, and a handwritten note, the day our forever recipe became official. The house deed lay on the lawyer's desk, its crisp new pages marking another milestone in their journey. Sarah watched as the notary stamped each signature, making official what her heart had known for months. This was her home, her family, her life. And with these adoption papers, their lawyer smiled, sliding another document forward, it becomes complete. Emma and Jacob Anderson with two legal parents. The children had insisted on being present for this moment. Emma held Sarah's hand, while Jacob bounced in his chair, both watching intently as she signed her name, Sarah Matthews Anderson. Does this mean we can write Mom on our Mother's Day cards now? Jacob asked, earning chuckles from the adults. You can write whatever feels right in your heart, buddy, Mark said softly. Later that evening, Sarah hung the newly framed deed beside Helen's recipe book in the kitchen. The parallel wasn't lost on her. Two documents that spoke of belonging, of choosing to build something lasting together. Our house, Emma said, hugging her from behind. Forever. Sarah held her daughter close, watching Mark help Jacob with his homework at the kitchen table. Forever, she agreed, knowing that some recipes like love only get better with time. The family calendar on the kitchen wall told their story in multicolored ink. Emma's science fair, Jacob's championship game, Mum's curriculum presentation, Dad's day off, family picnic. Each entry represented a piece of their shared life, a year of moments both ordinary and extraordinary. Sarah, now elementary education coordinator, had pinned Jacob's latest math test beside the calendar, his first perfect score. Next to it hung Emma's science fair ribbon and a photo of their whole family at her award ceremony. Mark's promotion to garage manager meant more regular hours, their evening meals now a consistent celebration of togetherness. "Mom!" Jacob called. From the backyard, where he practiced soccer under the same oak tree that had witnessed their vows. "Can you help me with this new kick?" "Coming." Sarah marked her spot in Helen's recipe book, now filled with a year's worth of new family recipes, and headed outside. Emma looked up from her homework at the kitchen table, sharing a smile with her father. Their family recipe had proven perfect, equal parts love and understanding, seasoned with joy and baked in the warmth of belonging. Mark watched his wife teaching their son soccer moves, their laughter drifting through the open window. Some recipes, he thought, turned out even better than you could imagine. Sometimes life's most precious gifts come wrapped in unexpected packages. In a small country church on a quiet Saturday afternoon, Sarah Anderson watches her students perform. Their spring concert, her hand clasped in her husband's. Their children, Emma and Jacob, sing from the choir risers, their faces glowing with joy. The white dress Sarah wears today isn't a wedding gown, but a simple sundress, chosen for an ordinary afternoon that feels extraordinary all the same. A year ago, she stood in this same church, her dreams seemingly shattered. Now she understands that endings can be beginnings in disguise. Sometimes the best families aren't born. They're built through acts of kindness and courage, one cherished, moment at a time. Could anyone have predicted that a chance encounter between a heartbroken bride and a struggling single dad would lead to such perfect happiness?